Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to work on Simplicity 5785 and I'm going to make View F, the mini skirt. This pattern consists of two pattern pieces, number 29 and 30. 30 is the waistband and 29 is the skirt. And I want to point out something different about this pattern. Here you see that it has the instructions to cut on the fold, and then here you see seam lines. Also here it doesn't say anything about how many to cut of the fabric. However, in the instructions, and I always recommend that you read the instructions before you get started, because sometimes the instructions include something that you would have missed if you just look at the pattern pieces or something like that, such as this one. The instructions say that you should cut one of the fabric and cut one of a facing fabric. Now, the fabric that I'm using is a lightweight denim fabric from JoAnn's. It's the Lucky brand fabric, and this is a 4-ounce denim. Very thin, very light, no stretch to it. Here you can see that I've already pinned the fabric pieces, and I am using the same fabric for the lining. What we're going to do, we're going to start from here at 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to mark it here at 1/4 of an inch and then sew around and come back up at 1/8 of an inch. We've marked the 1/8 seam allowance here. Let's go ahead and mark the 1/4 inch here, which is going to be right there. That's my 1/4 inch, and I'm going to use a different color chalk just to mark the 1/8. All right, so I pretty much got that right. 1/8 of a seam here. That's going to be my my pivot mark. I'm going to pivot to the 1/4 inch here, and I'm going to do the same on the other side so I know where to pivot back to the 1/8 of an inch. So first I'll mark my 1/4 inch. And then I'll mark the 1/8. I don't know if you can hear all that noise going outside my window, but I live in a large city, and cars honking and sirens are pretty much the norm. All right, there's my marking. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, but I've got my needle at the 1/8 mark, and that's where I'm going to begin my sewing. I've also got my piece of paper under so it doesn't suck in the fabric into the feed dogs. I'm going to zoom out and start to sew. Now we can go ahead and press our skirt. Now that our fabric has been pressed, we're ready for our next step. which is going to be to sew this right here. When you're sewing this 1/4 inch seam allowance around this circle, just take it slowly, take your time, and pivot little by little. Which means basically that as I go along my circle, I am lifting my presser foot and turning it just a little bit. And now we've got our seam sewn at the waistband. So we're going to move on to our next step, which is going to be the waistband. Take your fabric and make your markings. We've marked our circles. And the next step in the instructions is to fold this edge over at 1/8, which is going to be much smaller than from where the circle is. So fold that over at 1/8 of an inch, same on the other side, and then on this unmarked edge, you're going to fold over at 1/4 of an inch. Now that we've pressed our waistband edges, here are the marks. We're going to go back to our skirt and we are going to clip right to the stitch line, not over it and not through it, but just right to it. Once you've clipped the waistband of your skirt, if you're using the same fabric on both sides, then it doesn't matter which side is your right side, but just make sure you're using your right side of the fabric if you're using different fabrics. You're going to pin your waistband to your skirt. And this folded edge, you're going to match it with your seamed edge here. When your waistband is pinned to your skirt, it should look like this. And see, all those little clips help to stretch the skirt so that the waistband fits. Now you're going to sew 1/4 of an inch across. Before I start sewing this, I just wanted to note that sewing this may be a little tricky and challenging. You can try basting it using your longest stitch before you use a regular stitch. The main goal here is to try to get this sewn on as straight as possible without puckers or without catching the folds in the skirt. So I did end up sewing the waistband to the skirt, and there aren't any puckers. It's pretty straight. But I do have to say that it was a little bit tricky. And what I did was I started on this side. I sewed around towards the middle. And then trying to get towards this very deep curve here is where I ran into a little trouble. So I took it out of the machine, refixed the waistband, and then I started back in from this end to meet that end, and that seems to have worked a trick. So if you can't sew the waistband straight across in one shot from this end because of puckering and pinching on the front of your fabric, you can always take it out, readjust your fabric, and go in from the other end, from the opposite end that you were just in. But really, if you have any questions, you can always send me a message or put a comment, and I'll get back to you and try to help you. Once you get that waistband sewn on, you're going to press up and you will be pressing over. So this piece that you press down probably needs to be pressed again. It's going to be sewn over that seam. And you can put some fray check in there if if the seam is fraying too much or anything. I'm gonna clean it up a little bit, and I'm gonna take it to my iron and press it down, and then I will baste it before I stitch it. I've pinned my waistband, and I am going to now start stitching very close to that fold line. And here's the finished version of the skirt. So it does stick up a lot, just like how the pattern shows on the cover, like view F. But it's cute. I mean, she could, you know, keep her undies from showing if she holds her hands down, kind of. So there it is. There's the skirt. And just to show you how I closed it up in the back, I did add 2 snaps. So there's one here and there's one here at the bottom. So that way you can close it up. And that's the skirt. Well, thanks for watching my video. Stay tuned for more.